Okay,
people. Okay, perfect. Thank you for joining. Nice to see so many of you to the People Value Stream Virtual Network launch event. So Professor Peter Hines and Ms. Cheryl Jekyll will be leading the launch event workshop today, and we'll also be having some thoughts from thought leaders from Ashish Chalwa from ST Microelectronics in India and Kate Grimaldi from Paylocity Talent Management. There'll also be a roundtable discussion, and we'll put you into breakout groups so you can really interact and discuss various thoughts with one another. And at the end, I'll be explaining a bit more about the virtual network. So I'm the event manager for the People Value Stream Network. So any questions that you may have for me, you can send to me afterwards. And also the chat box we're going to be looking at throughout the workshop. So any questions you have or thoughts, please do put them into that box for Peter and Cheryl. Okay, so I'll hand over to Peter. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Emma, for that. And welcome to everyone along. Emma and I have been running a number of webinars for the last, well, about 8 or 9 months since we started to hit lockdowns and so forth. And to be honest, this is the one that certainly has attracted the most interest, the most people, etc. So it's very, very good to hear you all coming and joining us here. And so I think, first of all, what we might do is just introduce who we are, the three of us, just so you know who's running the session. I'm Peter Hines. I've been working in the lean space for about 30 years. Really from the very early days, I actually worked with Dan Jones at Cardiff University, and we set up the Lean Enterprise Research Centre together. And Dan with Jim Womack, sort of original writer of The Machine That Changed the World and other books, etc. like that. And I suppose in my sense, I've been interested in the people side and why things don't sustain for a very long time. So that's sort of where my interest is coming from. So I'd like to now introduce you to Cheryl, who'll say a few words about herself.
For me, it's good morning. I guess for many of you, it's good afternoon. I'm really excited to have our discussion today. My interest, I also have about 30 years of continuous improvement, and I was working in Lean before they called it Lean, and have developed an interest over time in the area of HR's role in supporting Lean transformations, not so much just how we apply it to HR, but what the role is. It really ties into this entire conversation today. How do we optimize the people part? So I've been shifting to, towards this people value stream idea as I've been interacting with Peter. And so I wrote a book on lean human resources, and the second edition just came out. So I'm excited about that. They asked me to put in a book what I learned the last 10 years. So that was hard work. Then I had to finally realize you're never stop learning. So eventually you just have to stop and say, that's what I've learned up till today. So anyway, really looking forward to hearing from all of you today. This is mostly a discussion, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. And Emma, just say a few words.
Yes, as I mentioned, my background is in events, so I've been working alongside Peter for the last 8 years, and we've also we have the Enterprise Excellence Network as a group for European lean leaders, as well as now the People Value Stream Network, which I'm working now with Peter and Cheryl on, and organising the background and these Zoom meetings as well at the moment, and hopefully physical events next year.
Great. Okay, so I think the first thing, I'm just going to say a few words to introduce what do we mean by the people value stream, because maybe it's a term you haven't come across before, but really what we're trying to do is capture the people side of lean. And I suppose by way of background, if we ask ourselves a few of these questions, you can ask your colleagues as well. Have you ever had problems engaging other members of your management team? Have you ever had problems engaging frontline workers? Do you find not all improvement activity sticks? Do you find improvement activity gets stuck at a plateau? Do you find that people often fail to implement what they've learnt on offline courses? And do you find that behaviour of colleagues is inconsistent? And my guess is probably if we went round everyone, we could all tick off most of those on that list. Really, I think our thought process is that's probably because in terms of improvement activity, whether we use lean or agile or Six Sigma, some other approach, that we often don't have sufficient attention to the people side of lean. And this was a little picture that we developed to sort of explain this. If you look at the left-hand side of this bridge, what you'll see is the traditional functions that drive a lot of technical improvement, like Lean and Six Sigma, etc. It tends to be maybe the qualities driving Six Sigma, maybe engineering or operations driving Lean, ICT driving Agile, for example. They all tend to be quite technically orientated, perhaps quite scientific thinking, and they produce a wealth of tools and techniques. And this is what, in Lean terms, certainly Toyota would call the continuous improvement side of things. But again, using the Toyota terminology, they also talk about respect for people, which hasn't translated particularly well into a lot of this Lean or enterprise excellence journey. And I suppose when we see organizations trying to do this, it's often driven by the HR function, or maybe if there's a large company, an organizational design development function trying to look at cultural change and leadership. But what we find is often the two sides don't meet very well, and sometimes people on both sides get frustrated because the other's not listening, and that we don't create sustainable change in the correct way. And that's probably because in most organizations, certainly if you're coming from a Lean perspective, we tend to be chasing the product value stream, or even the product development value stream, or something like that. Whereas actually we think we should be chasing and focusing on the people value stream, the life cycle, which is a bit more like the talent management, I suppose, in the traditional HR sense. And that's really what we're thinking about here, is how can we focus on this? And, you know, most of us talk about the 8th waste of wasted human potential. And it's our belief this is probably actually the largest of the waste and probably causes a lot of the other 7. Whereas traditionally, the 7 waste very much looks at the technical side. So how do we get after this people waste and actually yield the profit potential that comes out of it? So this is a little cartoon just to try and capture what we mean by the people value stream. So in a traditional sort of organization, or this is how we might look at it from a Lean point of view, that the customer is the line manager who requires a certain number of people with a certain number of skills. And then traditional HR departments or sub-departments in a larger organization in particular organize something like this. We perhaps all have slightly different names, but roughly like this. And then the supply, we either hire our own people or use an agency, we train our people, or hire in some support to do that. And then we recruit the individual, who obviously is very Lean to start with, this individual. And then they go through what is quite often for them is quite a tortuous path in how they're being managed and recruited and inducted and developed is often a bit like a sort of zigzag journey. It's not really like a nice flow like we'd have in Lean. And putting this picture together sort of reminded us very much about a sort of push-based value stream that would be the case in a manufacturing or service environment. The result of this is probably people leave before they might. The result of this is they might stay, let's say, 4 years as a guest, but in reality, their value adding is probably quite low. And in fact, that ratio of 45% comes out of some past research I did with some Italian colleagues. So this was based on the North Italian plane companies in that organization. The point being that if you think of the sheer cost of loss of productivity, let alone satisfying the needs of the line manager and the people, it's perhaps not working too well. and hence we don't get a happy line manager. So the idea of the people value stream is adopting the sort of thinking that perhaps many of us have done in Lean, is we might rethink some of the things that we might do in the sort of supporting HR department. And what you can see, without going into huge depth, is some of the things that are in these boxes in terms of developing behavioral norms. For instance, a lot more coaching of the line managers to pass some of the traditional skills onto the line managers, etc. Maybe a little bit different. And instead of managing, if you like, the sub-function and managing vertically, we're trying to develop what is the requirement, the internal customer, the voice of the customer, and in terms of what skills do they need, what behaviors, levels of engagement, and what sort of physical and mental well-being do they need from their people. And then think about the flow of people into, through, and out of the organization in terms of development and training, personal behavioral deployment, etc. You can read the slide. And as a result of this, we might, for instance, double the amount of time people spend using their learning curve, focus much more on the development of people rather than, if you like, using them as inanimate objects, and actually have a great increase in their value-adding ratio. With the result, we get a much healthier and happier individual, and a much healthier and happier line manager, and a much more effective and efficient organization. So that's sort of, in summary, a little bit about what the people value stream is. Clearly, if we want to move from that current state to this future state, some organizations are a lot nearer this than others, but for most organizations, there's significant work that will have to be done, which needs to be a combination of the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the bridge by focusing on this people value stream. So that's a little bit of, by way of background of the whole topic that we're looking at. The idea of today is that we just take one little slice of this and focus on that and use this for that. What we'll do afterwards is Emma will send you through some further information. Cheryl and I have put together this short 5 or 6 page paper on what the people value stream is. So we'll send that through to you and you can have a look. And shortly we will be launching a website called peoplevaluestream.com, which will be up in the new year. So on that basis, I'm going to pass on to Cheryl, who's going to launch us into the performance management.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. You guys, just to give you a sense of our approach, I'm only going to speak a few minutes this morning on this, just sharing some of my ideas, like 3 to 5 minutes. We have a couple of other people that are also going to share, again, relatively briefly, what their thoughts on this are. We're then going to have a larger discussion. So this is really meant from here to be, it's sharing different best practices, thoughts, and ideas. We're also going to have a 15-minute period that you'll go into small groups and be able to talk amongst yourselves what your thoughts are about this topic, and then we'll close out. So this is definitely meant to be an engaging discussion. So the piece that I want to share is one of the people who have, are the slides in my hand or your, there we are. Yeah. So I'm this was written in 1982. By Edward Deming, and I've always just felt when I read this that it said more to me about the problem with it than I had ever seen described. And I often, there's an article that you'll get that talks at much more length about these topics. I'm not proposing that whatever he's saying is definitely, you know, the right answer and what we should do, but I find his work, and this is chapter 3 of the book Out of the Crisis. So he just did a lot of talking about what about performance reviews is the, you know, causes the damage. What I know from being in HR for many years and being up close to it, and some of you in this discussion might have seen it, I have seen the damage up close. I've seen people quit their job over what happened in their performance review. I've seen people feel demoralized and set back. So this list, I'm not going to go through each one and talk about it because this isn't, but what he's speaking to is a lot of review systems focus on individual performance versus team performance. And if from lean, we believe in a value stream, meaning this is a team sport, we want to be careful that we're not using review processes or appraisal or even feedback systems that drive the idea that it's up to you personally instead of it's a system. And that made a lot of sense to me. He also speaks to the rating process. I've become a fan of never using ratings, partly because I've seen up close the damage. If our idea is the greatest waste is human potential, why would we want to be following a bell curve that says the middle group is average? The idea is almost every single person has more to contribute than we're likely tapping. So I have found I've seen people put their whole heart and soul into their jobs. When they get the rating of you're acceptable or average or as expected, they pull back. It's a disengaging process. So I've seen it up close, so I know it to be true. I'm sure some of you might have had similar processes. So I'm going to encourage you when you get this, if you're interested, go ahead and take a look at that article. And one of the other things I would comment on, let's go to the next slide. He then goes to what he thinks should be done instead. One is change the way you think about it. So really considering, even if you've had 20 years of doing it one way, what's really the impact of what we're getting out of this and what's really the purpose? The next, I have run into a number of organizations. I'll be interested to hear today if any of them are here who have stopped doing performance appraisals as they would have been done in the traditional sense. And the last point, which I think is definitely worth discussion, is debundling what you're using them for. A lot of times, if I were to say to someone, let's take them out, they would say, well, how would we do merit increases? How would we recognize people who went above and beyond? How would we make sure we have the legal protection? So what his point here is, get clear what you're using it for and consider whether you could break things apart so you do one thing at a time. So in the end, what I found this article helpful to do, it's not so much I think any of your teams would read an article and change what you do, or you're going to come to this event and just automatically change. But I do think it's helpful for your leadership teams together to sit and have discussions about it, that to think about and just become more aware and consider alternatives, be willing to experiment. So I think the articles can just be impetus to create discussion, which is why I offer it today. So that's, I think we'll go on to our next. We have the people joining us. We're just seeding the conversation with a couple of different ideas about what we might do. We'll look forward to hearing your ideas.
Would you like me to share the Paul Marciano view?
Sure, this isn't very long, and this is a small video that has some additional perspective that we can take into the discussion today.
Peter, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear what the person is saying, yeah?
Relationship review.
Yeah, no, I can't hear anything either, just looking at the slide.
Okay, I think maybe the sound's not coming through. So let's skip that and go on to the input. So
Yeah.
I'll hand back to you, Cheryl.
Yeah, we can send the link out.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So our first guest
is Ashish Chawla.
Okay, so you go ahead and introduce him, and then I'll introduce Kate.
Okay, so we're going to get a perspective on this, and there isn't a right or a wrong answer, and there's various ways to do it. So we invited a couple of people that we've been working with over the last few years to give an input. So the first of those is Ashish Chawla, who is the head of HR of ST Microelectronics in India. So maybe you'd like to introduce yourself and share some of your thoughts on this, Ashish.
So I'll just share my screen first, if yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Is my screen visible by any chance?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. Okay, I'm, as you've already heard from Peter, I'm heading HR for India for ST Microelectronics. And we've been obviously, as Cheryl mentioned, also having a lot of challenges with the performance management system. And we've realized that the objectives that we are setting for our people haven't been really yielding the results that we wanted. The trigger, of course, for us was the fact that a lot of our objectives didn't really meet the goals of the organization. So we realized that we were measuring the wrong things, first of all. And this led us to a lot of introspection. And of course, by chance, we came across this very interesting case. I'm just going to jump into the example here, the processionary caterpillars. And I'll be very brief about this example, but just to share, this was an experiment done by a French naturalist in the early 90s and 1900s. And he basically just put some caterpillars together, and these are called processionary caterpillars. And what he did was, these normally caterpillars go in a procession, and they one after the other, and they join together in the sense that one is at the backside of the other, and they move together. And they can go as long as 300, and it's actually a survival technique, because then they look like a serpent, and they actually avoid predators. So the idea behind this was that he did this experiment. He put them in a pot, and he put the front of the caterpillar onto the back of another. And they became, of course, then they started to look something like a circle, and they started moving around. And they couldn't find any food. And so he put food just a few centimeters away from them, and they just kept going round and round and round. And what happened was they actually ended up dying of starvation. Seems like a gory story, but I just wanted to drive home a point here. And this is a realization that we had ourselves as well. The fact was, we oftentimes mistake motion for meaning or activity for accomplishment. And what we do is, we are pretty busy doing stuff that we feel is really counting for something, but actually we are not very clear about it. And that's how we actually came across a concept called ROMA, results-oriented management by accountability. And what we realized was we were managing things in the wrong way. And a lot of things that we were measuring as performance was actually not performance. Those were activities and leading to results which weren't the desired results, because the focus was itself wrong. And this was a very interesting discovery for us, because we thought we were doing the right things initially. So modern day management requires us to look beyond activities and outputs to focus on results, actual results. And what is result? And seemingly very simple concept, but believe me, when we look inside it, it's pretty deep. It's something which is a measurable change in state that is derived from a cause and effect relationship. Most organizations aren't really focusing on the cause and effect relationship. And what we end up doing is having objectives for our people, and this is what gets measured, and what Cheryl was mentioning, we end up rewarding or not rewarding. And the fact is that what we are rewarding many a times is an activity rather than a result. And this is something that we found through a lot of evaluation of our performance management system. The objectives were not very clear to people. The purpose of the objective was not very clear to people, and they didn't have something which is called line of sight. They didn't have a line of sight to the purpose, and the lower in the hierarchy you were, the line of sight was that much distant, and you were just focusing on the activity without really knowing the purpose. So what we also realized is, to create a high performance organization, we needed to have goal setting which was outcome based. And this word has become a mantra in our organization today. Most of the organizations are output based rather than outcome based. So the performance management system is looking at short-term gains rather than medium to long-term gains. What is the impact of what we are doing is not getting measured in the right way. And in fact, it is not even being put in the objective in the correct way. We talk about smart objectives, but believe me, what we are measuring in those smart objectives is actually not very smart. We are missing out on something which is very important, is on the overall understanding of why that particular thing is happening. And I just shared what was the trigger for us. We had some people of employees having loosely defined objectives, and wherever objectives were defined, the outcomes weren't always clear. And we had multiple non-smart objectives, and activities and tasks were confused as objectives. So normally what happens is when a project is getting launched, there is a gap, right? Where we are and where we need to be. And normally what happens is every organization is having a lot of inputs, but we always are wondering why there are so many inputs, but where are the results that we desire? And they're not there to be seen. So this is happening through what we put as the bridge, and somehow it's uncannily resembling the bridge that Peter shared. It's the performance management excellence. And of course, there are obstacles on the way. The crocodiles, the alligators are sharing that particular element there. But the fact is, to cross this particular bridge is the most important one. And how we construct this bridge is taking us to the right destination. This is from Bersin, and we adopted this model, of course, and we realized that we were thinking that we were at the top level, but we weren't. And our target, of course, was to reach our performance management, which drives results rather than anything else. And we started to work towards this particular goal in a very, very concerted manner. So what Roma does is it focuses the shift from what we are doing to what we are achieving. And a lot of activities happen, but what are these activities leading to? So many a times we are starting with the activity and moving to the result. Whereas we should actually start with the result, where what we want to, the purpose, the longer term, medium term purpose, and then sort of grade the activities accordingly across the hierarchy. And every person in the hierarchy must know what his or her role is in getting that result. So seemingly very simple, but believe me, again, not very easy to implement. So we are looking at inputs, we are looking at activities, which is the how part, and what we want, output, outcomes, and of course, the impact is why we want that particular element. The previous focus has been, in many organizations, has been on limited to outputs. The newer focus is where outcomes are. And this also takes me to the question that was asked by somebody in the chat box. One of the biggest way to engage people is to share the outcomes with them, not tell them to reach the outputs. The moment you tell them the outcomes that are desired from the work that they do, whatever level they might be, that's one way which helps people feel a little bit more engaged and in many cases even fulfilled. And of course, that does not mean you remove the focus at the lower levels. You need to have the focus at the lower levels, but it's a broader focus. And each level has to have indicators. And this is what we're talking about, the line of sight. So you actually have a line of sight to the top, from the bottom hierarchy till the very top. Important element here. So when making a plan or reporting a progress, we are challenged like never before to describe the connection between the work we do and the difference we make. The difference that we make is the impact, which is very similar to the outcome-based thing. So this is the most important part of what I want to share. And this is, we have this two-box thing, which is quantity and quality. How much do we do and how well do we do it? Then we have another axis, which is the effort and effect. How hard did we try? And effect is how is anyone better off because of that? You will find when we combine these two axes together, the most of the goals that we have in our careers and even in organizations is on the top two boxes, where the quantity and effort is where most of our objectives are based. Effort and the quality to a good in some extent, but rarely do you find goals which is where we're talking about the effect that the goal is causing. And this, believe me, is the most difficult goal to set. And why? And the least important is the first one, where we have maximum goals for people. And the most important is the bottom one, where we find the least. And reason why we don't have too many goals at the bottom, because we feel more in control of the top than the bottom. And that is why this is a journey that is so difficult to take for most of us. And more goals we have for people at the effect part, more the organization will have a better performance management system. So just to give you what these would entail, and these are the types of performance measures that we need to have for each of these quadrants that we just mentioned. And there are questions which we can have, which are the accountability questions, which gets us to the lower quadrants as well. I'm not going to focus on these questions, but just to share, these questions are there, which we need to ask ourselves, which will take us to the purpose and therefore will take us to the effect rather than the effort. So we start with results, determine indicators, define explicit targets, and collect information, monitor, and review analysis. And this leads to, believe me, the best performance management system that you'll have. And it will also lead you to people who are making an impact and how we can reward them better. So just to end on a philosophical quote, which is not very philosophical, by the way, destiny is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice. It's a thing not to be waited for, it's a thing to be achieved. And that can be achieved through the effect or the impact that we make. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Are these slides going to be available then to send out to people?
Sure, I can, definitely.
Yeah, that would be amazing. There was a lot in there. Even I found myself, I couldn't keep up to take notes. So it'd be great to have the slides. Thank you for
sure,
that.
Definitely.
So next we have Kate Gribaldi. So let's shift. You want to, I guess, stop sharing your screen? Where are you, Kate? There you are. Hi, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, so I first came across, so I had some business dealings with Paylocity. It was interesting. I was talking to one of the employees about a topic and they mentioned how great the feedback process was. So I found myself investigating it. That got me to Kate. She's here just to share some top line, some of the innovation that they've done and what the results have been. So thank you, Kate. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Let me go ahead and share this here. I just have a couple of slides, I think make it a little bit easier. So start by saying I'm Kate Grimaldi. I'm the Director of Strategic Talent Programs, as well as Internal Communications and HRBP teams here at Paylocity. My responsibility is really about that talent program piece. So what we're talking about today, how do we really get these, the talent management to where it needs to be? I was listening to what Cheryl was saying earlier and Ashish, some of the things that you were saying, and I couldn't help but thinking that Peter and Cheryl really figured out how to put the right people together, because this is exactly kind of the next step is that I'm looking at. I really latched onto that bridge piece that Peter was talking about earlier. And really at Paylocity, what we really think about from that bridge piece is sort of this turn-by-turn approach to managing performance. And so when we think about feedback, one of the things that I kept going back to, and it was what Cheryl was saying, which is somebody puts their heart and soul into their job and they get to that annual review and they're told, yep, you're doing exactly what we wanted. Thanks, have a great day. And they're left feeling disengaged. They're left feeling like, what else could I have done? I didn't know. And so I started digging into this and I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, a lot of focus groups. And what I found, at least where we were struggling, is we are a high growth technology company. We move incredibly fast. And to what Ashish said, sometimes we were just focused on the activities. It was just get it done, get every single activity done. And we weren't actually focused on, were people doing the activities in the right way? Were we getting the benefit out of them? So we started talking a little bit more and I really sort of worked on this, what we would call a GPS approach. So when we were allowed to go places, depending on where you live, you'd get in your car and you'd plug in your destination into your GPS and your GPS would tell you, turn right, turn left. Your GPS wouldn't wait for you to get 2 miles, 2 kilometers out of the way to then say, turn around, you're going the wrong way. They'll tell you in the moment. It's the same way with giving feedback to people. They don't want to wait until the end of the year or the end of the cycle to hear, I wish you would have done that differently. I wish you would have responded. I wish that project would have been handled in a different way. They need to know in the moment. So by taking that turn-by-turn approach, you're having those consistent conversations. And that could be through any any way you want, whether it's something as simple as you're having a conversation, you send a follow-up email, you're documenting it somewhere, and maybe you're not, maybe you're just having the conversation. It's bite-sized pieces of feedback in the moment. It allows people to redirect as the GPS would if you're going the wrong way, to keep going. If you do document those conversations and you do some sort of review at the end of the year or the end of, the cycle, whatever you're using, that's already written for you because you've already given that feedback. And hopefully that person who has put their heart and soul feels that they've gotten that feedback as to what they're doing and what they've needed to change. So when you have that conversation that says you met expectations or you were average this year, they're not surprised. A big part of what we found was that people felt surprised. We were moving so quickly and they said, but I was checking everything off the list that you gave me. How did I not do a great job? I checked everything off. And then we had leaders saying, well, but you didn't do it exact right way I would have wanted. And so I started asking those leaders, well, when are you telling them? Well, I'm telling them at the end of the year. And it doesn't seem like rocket science, I know, but really taking that approach of telling them in the moment and then putting it somewhere that you can reference it later to say, hey, do you remember when we had this project and I gave you this feedback? You either took the advice that I gave you or you didn't. And this is kind of where we ended up. So, that's kind of what I'm really showing you on this slide is the clearer the destination, the easier it is to determine what you need to get there. And so I think that fits in nicely what we've been talking about is focus on where you want to be, focus on what the result is. Give that feedback timely and frequently. Find a way to document that, put it down somewhere more so you don't forget. I'm the queen of Post-it notes because I forget everything. And so for me, a lot of times it's making sure that I haven't forgotten what I've told someone. And then consider using that sort of real-time rerouting support, just like a GPS. You are the GPS for the people that work for you, for your leaders, rerouting them as they go, and then capturing those discussions. What that really ends up looking like is this really great roadmap, which is making sure that you are checking in on each one of these things. And I'm sure we all call these things differently, meeting recaps, career check-ins. But the idea is each of these checkpoints, as you're talking with people, they know what to expect. They don't feel as though they are surprised. They don't feel as though they were headed in the wrong direction and you let them get so far down the path. I'm sure we can all think of a time where someone let us get really waist deep into a project and then they said, that's exactly not all what I wanted. And you're left feeling like I spent all this time and energy working on this and now you're telling me it's completely wrong. It's the same way for those frontline people and even the activities. They want to know that they're headed in the right direction. So what we have found is really just sort of taking that turn by turn approach, really looking at ourselves as GPS and making sure that we are sort of kind of moving people around as they're going. The other piece is, our company is about 4,000 people. Each one of our sort of business units does things a little bit differently. And at first I thought that was actually a hindrance, but what I found is actually really helpful. So on our product side, our product development who handles our technology, they use this frequent and timely feedback and they do a quarterly check-in versus an annual review. And that really aligns to their business in terms of how they do products. So as they're developing the software, they work in 2-week sprints. For them, it doesn't make sense to wait till the end of the year to tell someone, hey, 15 weeks ago when we did that 2-week sprint, you didn't do what you were supposed to. We have other groups in our operations area. They do a mid-year check-in and an annual review. And for them, again, that works because the way that our business sort of ebbs and flows, they need that check-in after a really busy season, and then they get a second check-in after the next busy season. However you choose to use sort of your feedback sessions, whether it is annual review, quarterly, or you get rid of the review altogether, frequent and timely feedback is incredibly important, and it's only going to help people feel like they know what's going on. Transparency is something that we talk about a lot in the HR space, especially now with everything going on. People just want to see behind the curtain. They want to know what you're thinking, and really taking this turn by approach is something that we have found is really helpful. So,
okay, thank you. All right, so these are some different perspectives. We can take any questions or comments before we put you into small groups and you can have a chance to partly. We want to make sure you had a chance to meet a couple of people up close and share your ideas so that everybody could share some. But any immediate thoughts? You have to be thinking something probably.
Cheryl, it's Jill Nucky.
Hi, Jillian.
Hi, I find the GPS approach that just presented, actually very insightful. I've been trying to talk to my guys about looking in the rearview mirror instead of looking at the road ahead. And so tying that in, I think will help to make a difference as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jillian. It's nice to hear your voice. Anyone else want to make a comment? All right. Well, let's go on. We have questions for you. So let's go into our discussion. So the goal of this is to have us talking about it. And for those, it will probably help when you're in smaller groups. You can pick a question that you might want to be thinking about. We're going to do the poll first.
Yeah, we can do the poll.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to launch the poll now. Peter, can you see the results to this poll?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. We're just about there at 100%. Yeah, that may be it, Peter, in terms of the results. It's not surprising about the, although it's just half. I think sometimes when I used to ask this question, be 80% of the people were still doing traditional. Looks like there's 32% with regular feedback with minimal documentation, no ratings, which is where I see a lot of organizations currently. The other in the chat box, I believe, is annually with, annually, it doesn't sound like it's documented, it's an annual conversation, if I got that right. So it gives us a sense as we get into our conversations about where people stand at the moment. So let's go to the questions.
Okay, can you see the questions now?
No, we're still at the poll. Here we go, roundtable discussion. So what concepts have we discussed today that have resonated with you and why? So if that's something you guys might want to talk about, what do you like or not like about your approach to performance management? What have you considered changing? What would you or have you? And then if you could improve your approach to performance management, what outcome would that be? So thinking about what would be true if it got better. So with that, Peter, are you good with putting them in groups?
Yep, so I've done that. So we have 7 groups of around 4 for each group. So I'm just going to put you into your breakout groups now to discuss one of those questions together. And then we'll come back after 15 minutes.
All right, 15 minutes. Are they mostly going in?
They are. We have a couple still here.
Kate, are you able to get in a group?
I can put Kate in. I've kept Kate and Ashish here, but would you like me to put...
I would ask them. I certainly think it's fine for them to join a group.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to join a group. Feel free to stick me in one.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay.
So we've got 2 not in.
We have a couple more. They're going in slowly. I think they need to select that they want to go into that group.
And that might have been new to them, especially if maybe they're on a phone, but it looks like they're getting in.
Yeah, we just have 2 people left, Corey and Jennifer. And Chris, I've kept you here. Would you like to go into a group?
No, that's fine. I'm not sure I could contribute specifically in terms of I don't actually work for anyone at the moment. So
Okay.
I don't got, my performance system is managing me.
Well, and that's probably pretty unmanageable. I couldn't help but say it.
No, Peter was thinking it.
Yeah.
Many people have tried, Chris.
Most have given up.
Yes, absolutely.
I was thinking, I
So
really
is
enjoyed.
Corey, Jennifer still here, or?
Peter, your internet's really poor, mate. You're sounding like a Dalek.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do. It's as good as I can get it.
Yeah, it's a shame. I really enjoyed Ashish's presentation. It was really good.
Yeah, I thought they were nice complementary, that they kind of dovetailed in a way.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's like they were both on results and she was really mostly talking about how to
It
stay.
that was good too. Kate's was very good too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I thought they fit together.
Ashish is quite a thinker. He does a lot of reading, and so whenever he comes up with something, it always is grounded in some literature or something. So
So I was wondering
I was
whether.
rather when I saw he had 30 slides there.
Yeah, he was fast. He was too fast. You know the outcomes that he's talking about. I was trying to link.
All right. Hello, everyone. Would anybody be willing to share anything that you guys talked about? It would just be great for you to hear from each other what was in the conversations. The floor is yours.
Communication is key. If you don't talk to people, you will not get what you want out of them. You know, fundamental to every presentation or every discussion earlier is if you don't talk to people, you're going to get nothing. And by talking to people, you find out what the potential is in the organization in some way, shape, or form. You find somebody who can do something that you didn't know about, and then you can exploit it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is Maithili. We talked about importance of quick touch points. How that coaching doesn't have to be planned. It can happen just at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Right there, right then. Yeah. What else did you guys talk about?
We were fortunate we had Ashish in our group, and we discussed his model and how thinking about the outcome, and use the word purposeful, so linking the purpose back to that. And this concept of people being busy all the time, and that's what we're measuring, and that's what we are, and actually we're just being busy fools, and turning it on its head to get to the outcomes. And I'm careful not to use the word outputs, outcomes, and how you cascade that down through the organization. So that's in terms of the first question, what concept? That's a real sort of mind-bending concept, really.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, this was recorded and will be available to you. So not just the slides, but you'll have the recordings as well of Kate and Ashish.
Put me in mind Ashish's talk actually of the sort of Kirkpatrick 3 and 4 of taking that sort of concept of behavior and results and turning that into sort of managing the whole person, not just a training course and so forth. And very much that sort of voice of the customer type of thing. So I could see a lot of lean and HR things coming together nicely there.
Yeah, I agree. All right. There was someone else about ready to speak. Was that Rebecca?
No, sorry, I just didn't put myself on mute.
Oh, all right. What else did you guys? There were 7 groups, so there was definitely some more conversations going on. quick to share.
Well, I can talk. Luckily, I was in Kate's group and we did talk about, or we did get her to talk a little bit more about what she was doing, and that was quite interesting. And it reminds me so much of the JR, or the job relations portion, where you get the trainers, the supervisors, to give constant and immediate feedback to all of the people to help grow the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of compared it to an assembly line. We have andons that tell us when something's going wrong. You know, why should we do that immediately if possible? And so why should we have HR or annual reviews that wait a whole year before you figure out what's going on?
Yeah, I like connecting it to a lean principle. One of the things that struck me when I was listening to it is the waste of time between the need for the feedback and when it's delivered. If that's 9 months, that's 9 months of wasted time. And obviously in our, I've seen a couple nods, that's a big waste. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely not a value added, waiting the time.
Yeah, definitely not.
That's an interesting thing about wasting time between feedback.
Yeah, it might help people see it better.
I mean, it's the same thing with, Jidoka and finding quality problems straight away, so you can actually do something about it straight away rather than wait. I mean, the idea of waiting a whole year to fix a quality problem would be a nonsense in a manufacturing site, but you do that with people, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
So the real thing is growing the people.
The real thing. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a tall order. It's a big challenge, but well worth doing. Any other comments? Things you talked about?
I know it was talked about a little bit earlier, but I really love the GPS metaphor. I'm just starting a new engagement 2 days in an assembly operation. Assembler errors seems to be a pretty consistent theme that I've uncovered already. And then my question is, and how do people know it's being done right? Where's the GPS that's giving them the signal that they're not doing it right quickly? So that's actually something I'm going to put into action today.
Yeah, I had that same response to it. I was like, wow. I know I hate that annoying voice in my car, so I really connected with the viscerally, like, I hate the sound of her correcting me. So, yeah. It's an experience people recognize and can share. Others? What are the thoughts you had on this? Sounds like there was some new thoughts on it. Thank you guys for sharing.
I'm going to share one thing, Cheryl, while people are thinking. The idea of the conversation, and you mentioned the word correction. I was sort of thinking of this. The psychology is we should have a ratio of 4 times recognition to 1 correction, and actually, if we think of the performance reviews, where it's often 4 times correction to one recognition and praise, and thinking about that frequent conversation, as we were saying, whether it's daily or weekly or something like that, think of that ratio rather than sort of correction being the more operative type of conversation.
Yeah, I would say one of the things, by the way, the thought is 10 to 1 instead of 4-1, try and go for 10 for 1. But when I've been working with people, one of the concepts that they get, but it's not, they realize they haven't been maybe taught that way, is when you speak to people about what you want to see, they will move towards it. The idea that they only need to hear what's wrong isn't necessarily, because usually if you think about how do you feel when someone corrects you? So you can have a lot of different responses. You defend or you react to it. They don't necessarily react to where they're going. And so even positive reinforcement to whatever part they're heading in the right direction is just generally more powerful. The human psyche responds better to which direction to head versus so yes, you took a wrong turn, but take a right. It's focus on where they need to go, less on where you took the wrong turn. So reroute, head that way. So think of it as, I think it's in the reroute. The more positive the conversations, I know for a fact, the better it goes. We're hardwired to positive reinforcement.
It's nearly giving them back a sense of control when you do that. If somebody feels like they've gone off course by that small bit of direction, it's like, okay, I'm empowered to go off in that way now. It's a good point.
Anyone else?
Yes, I kind of would like to add that I am always a fan of end-end. I think it's important to give immediate feedback. However, I still like the idea that after a certain period of time, there should be a sort of integrated view also. And that's why I like this short term, but also then on a longer term, sitting together, reviewing and looking at the bigger picture than, you know, just this instant. So I would like, for me, the perfect approach would be the end-end approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, Christine, I'm an and girl too. I'm always like, it's not this, it's this and that and that. We add it all together, add it together. So I love that.
Yeah. I think the and works, and you know, the parallel in the sort of lean or the manufacturing is the short interval control is for the short term, whereas you might have the daily or the weekly or monthly reviews, etc. And it's not, we wouldn't have one or the other. We'd have a combination. We might talk about slightly different issues at different you know, little coaching nudges on a daily basis or hourly or whatever, rather than a sort of bigger issues we might do on a weekly or monthly basis. But I think the and works well.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to just talk a little bit about the network? What brought us here? What brought us here today? What?
Let me put this up.
So we have a thought about what we might head towards in terms of our interest is to across the globe create a network of people who are sharing best practices. You know, it's not always going to be the same format, but the idea is to meet monthly for roughly 90 minutes. And I think they might be roundtables. It might be more one person speaking. A lot of times it might be an organization sharing, you know, what they're doing, you know, maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes, and then other people talking about it and having discussions. But it's meant, you know, it's a network, and obviously networks somewhat drive the topics they want to talk about, but these would all be around the people value stream. And the timing of this one covers the United States and Europe, but we're looking to have another one that'll pick up Asia and Australia. So over time, you'll get access to best practices from all over the world, people you probably would have never met otherwise, and hear what their organizations are doing to give you more and more input and ideas to your organizations. Peter, did you want to say something?
Yeah, the thought process and that Emma and I have been doing in Europe, we found that bringing people together in these sort of networks is a very good learning experience, because you know, I can give lectures for hours and hours, and occasionally people sort of stay and listen to more than half an hour of it. But I find what is probably some of the best learning is actually sharing a few of the ideas like Ashish and Kate did, having conversations. But actually, if we were in a group of sort of, I don't know, 15 or something like that, and get to know each other on a regular basis, then it creates a sort of more comfortable environment. A big group like this and no one knows each other, it's a bit difficult to, you know, to interact in a sort of such a nice way. So that was the thinking, that we could explore the different aspects of the people value stream. For instance, the sort of pictures I showed at the beginning, we can take different aspects of that. How would this work? How does this work? What's this? How does this join together? Cheryl and I can drop sort of a few thoughts or ideas in, and you know, use this as a sort of way of driving, benchmarking, sharing. And, you know, we felt probably keeping this on a virtual basis, because that means we can have people from different countries coming together, meet once a month, you know, reasonably regular basis, and, you know, build up that sort of learning and knowledge and so forth.
The cost, one of the other ideas of this is we've been in contact with a number of universities. One of our goals is to do what I would call research, but basically what we believe to be true is a lot of organizations wish they had more real insight to what other organizations were doing. Like beyond that quick poll, like how are you developing your leaders? How are you developing those coaching skills? What are you doing to develop your people? What's working better than others? So beyond the immediate network, we're invested in, as a larger group, finding out what other people are doing and sharing that information to help. I always say the best way forward is to, you know, keep shining the light from whoever can see farther forward to help raise the bar out of maybe, you know, maybe people haven't changed because they're just honestly not sure what to change to, and there's no right answer, but learning from other organizations would help. So we're going to be exploring ways as a network we could do some basic types of research, basically data gathering and information gathering, and share it with the network.
Okay, so anyone have any sort of final questions or points that you'd like to raise on either the network itself or anything we've talked about today? I think we have Mithili has a question or a point. Do you want to speak? Oh, you may be still on mute.
Yes. So my question is, where have you seen this working well? I know we've had two speakers, but you know, based on your experience working with organizations, where have you seen it working well, and where has it not worked well, and what's been the biggest challenge?
When you're saying this, Mithili, do you mean better performance management practices?
No, I mean the people value stream approach.
People value stream approach.
Maybe I'll jump in. I mean, I think the answer to this is certainly from the picture that I showed. We haven't seen anyone quite as far as that complete flows and so forth. So to some degree, we're in the sort of here's some theory, here's an idea. What we have seen, both of us, is examples of people doing parts of it extremely well. Probably the closest I've seen to this is actually a Toyota site in the UK. So those of you from the UK, the Burnaston manufacturing site, where they actually use an Abaya room, so Abaya big room, if you like, and they only have one Abaya room in the whole site, and it's basically, they don't use the language, but it is the people value stream, and they look at the whole flow from the, you know, what's the principles of how they manage people. How do you recruit on a behavioral basis? How do you induct? How do you, someone, I think, Mark, you were talking about, you know, some of the TWI type of stuff. How do they incorporate that sort of learning? How do they create support? And then they've actually turned the, how do we run meetings and huddles and KPIs? And they say, well, that's part of the people flow. That's about how we manage people, how we get the most out of people. So they've taken actually quite a lot of traditional lean stuff and turned it into the people flow. So the product value flow is very much the flow of the product through, and almost everything else that they do is actually this people flow, and it's about managing the people and removing this people way. So that's the only one that I've seen that's been as close explicitly to what you know, what we talked about earlier. Cheryl, do you want to add maybe some
Yeah,
examples?
one
from
thing,
your thoughts?
it leads me to two things. So one of the companies that came to mind, they don't necessarily call it people value stream, but they have excelled to a great extent at how they developed their people. They, along with working on the more tool parts, went headlong into that. One thing I would point out to it, they took the science behind what they know about positive psychology, and they shifted their view of lean as how to fix a problem and shifted it to what to work towards. And they used brain science to help people understand why positive psychology was the way to go. And so their entire leadership team talks about that as being a complete shift in their lives, about realizing the power of positive orientation to what you work towards. But they took out performance reviews. They used experimentation and kata principles to try different things and check their output. Their feedback from their people has been that the quality of the feedback was greater. I think there's maybe a few people here. We had this was in St. Louis, and we had an event at their facility. I was also just going to mention our January presentation is going to be by Rhonda Spencer from a company called Barry Wayne Miller. And the CEO of Barry Wayne Miller wrote a book called Everybody Matters. I don't know if any of you might have found it, but I met them 20 years ago. They're well known for having the most people-centric culture that just rocks. I've never seen anything like it. So Rhonda will be sharing what their approach. But mentally, I think to your point, our purpose is to keep taking some of these companies and see what we can learn from them. Just like we do, how do we operate operations better? Same way. We need to learn more about what people are doing.
So in the US, another company that you might want to look at is OC Tanner in Salt Lake City.
Absolutely.
They do a lot of people-centric work.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we have a couple of the OC Tanner guys on the call actually. Tyler,
Nice
you're with
call
us?
out, Mark.
You want to say anything?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm here. I'm not sure what to tell you, but it's we do. Yeah, people is definitely at the heart of everything that we do and work on, and being a recognition company, I couldn't imagine it any other way.
And in Asia, there's a company that I've been working with a few years ago, well, the last few years, that is this. It started with the CEO. His goal was to transform the company, and he wants to grow the people, and he started at the top and working his way down, because he realized that the very top and the managers and the supervisors had to change their behaviors first before you would see anything on the shop floor.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I've seen is a number of companies that are quite good at this, and it's almost they're good at it because there's a few people that really get it at the top of the organization, but they almost get it because it's just obvious to them. Whereas I think for most of us, we have to really think and conceptualize what this people value stream is. And then when we start doing that, we can start to piece the various bits together. And how would we do performance management? You know, how would we recruit people? How would we, you know, improve the mental well-being of people? But really look at it as a whole piece, rather than, you know, we got one person in HR trying to fight a lone fight on a particular topic without the management team perhaps paying as much attention as they might be.
Well, he sees it as a survival mechanism for the company from a long-term perspective. And the guy's in his mid-70s or late 70s, and he's trying to make sure that the company survives so the employees can have a company long enough that even their children or grandchildren can still work there.
Great.
So it's kind of interesting, somebody that old having still a vision to look out 20, 50 years, you know, ahead to build the community and build the people in the company.
Yeah, very good. Good. I think we probably sort of reached the end of where we can get to today. So I think on our behalf, I think we'd like to thank you all for attending. Hopefully you found today useful, and we started to have some conversations, and I think the idea of the network is we get to know each other a bit more, so we can have, you know, more ready conversations, maybe a slightly smaller group, and so forth. So thank you very much. Emma, do you want to just finish final words from you, and we'll shut down for the session?
Yes, so thank you, Peter. Thank you, Cheryl. And thank you, everyone, for your engagement and cooperation for the launch event. I will be sending out a follow-up email, which will have all of the material and the recording after this. And it will also have details on how to join the network, which, as Cheryl mentioned, we will be kicking off our first event in January. So it will be great to have you guys on board. So yes, look out for that email. In the meantime, you do have my contact details if there are any further questions for Peter and Cheryl, which I can pass on as well. So yes, thank you, everyone, and hope to see you again.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.